The cast on my left arm felt heavier than it should have. Not because of the plaster and fiberglass wrapping my fractured radius and ulna, but because of the weight of the secret I was carrying. As I lowered myself into the chair at my daughter Simone's dining table, I could feel her eyes on me, studying, calculating, waiting for me to say something about the purple bruising that peeked out from beneath the white edges of the cast. "Mama, you want some sweet tea?" Simone asked, her voice carrying that particular tone of forced brightness that Black mothers recognize instantly. The kind of brightness that says, "I'm going to pretend everything is fine until you're ready to talk." "Yes, baby. Thank you." I watched as my 32-year-old daughter moved around her kitchen with the grace she'd inherited from her grandmother. Simone had my mother's high cheekbones and my father's deep-set eyes, but she had something else, something harder, sharper, a edge I didn't recognize, even after raising her for 3 decades. She set the glass down in front of me, condensation already forming on the outside, and slid into the seat across from mine. Her manicured nails, always perfect, always done, drummed once against the mahogany table. Then she smiled. "My husband taught her a lesson," Simone said quietly, her eyes never leaving mine. The words hung in the air between us like smoke. I felt my throat constrict, felt the room tilt slightly to the left. Her, not someone, not a woman, her. "What did you say, baby?" Simone leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms over the designer blouse she wore, the kind I could never afford when she was growing up, working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on in our little apartment in Southeast D.C. "I said Marcus taught her a lesson. The woman who's been calling him. The one who showed up at his job last week making a scene." My good hand trembled as I reached for the sweet tea. "Simone, no, Mama, you don't understand. These women today, they have no respect, no boundaries." She knew he was married. She knew about me, about our kids, and she still... Simone's voice cracked, just slightly, before she regained her composure. "Marcus handled it. That's what a real man does. He protects his family." I stared at my daughter, my baby girl, the child I'd rocked to sleep singing Patti LaBelle songs, the little girl who'd cried when she saw homeless people on the street because her heart was too big for her small body. When had she become this? When had she started thinking violence was protection? "Simone Marie Johnson," I said, using her full name, the way I did when she was little and in trouble. "What did Marcus do?" She met my gaze with defiance. What he needed to do. The first time I met Marcus Thompson, he'd shown up to Sunday dinner with a bouquet of flowers for me and a Tiffany bracelet for Simone. I should have known then. Men who try too hard in the beginning are usually compensating for something they know they'll take away later. But Simone had been glowing. After 2 failed relationships and a broken engagement, she'd found someone who treated her like a queen, as she put it. Marcus had a good job in finance, drove a Mercedes, owned a condo in a nice part of Upper Marlboro. He was handsome, tall, dark-skinned, with a neat fade, and a smile that showed perfect teeth. He called his mother every Sunday. He quoted scripture at dinner. He was perfect. Too perfect. "Mama, I know what you're thinking," Simone said, pulling me back to the present. "You're thinking about your arm. You're thinking Marcus is like Daddy." My breath caught. We never talked about her father. Not in 28 years. Not since the night I'd packed our bags and left while Jerome was passed out drunk on the couch, his knuckles still bloody from where they'd connected with my jaw. "Your father," I started, "was a drunk and a coward," Simone finished. "Marcus isn't like that. He doesn't drink. He doesn't put his hands on me, Mama. He would never. But he put his hands on someone, I thought, and you're proud of it. Baby, how did I break my arm? I asked softly. Simone's jaw tightened. You fell down the stairs at your building. You told me that yourself. Yes, that's what I told you. But do you want to know the truth? For the first time since I'd arrived, I saw uncertainty flicker across my daughter's face, her fingers stilled on the table. Mama, your brother pushed me. The words came out before I could stop them. 30 years of silence, broken in 5 syllables. Simone's eyes went wide. What? No. Mama, Marcus would never. Not Marcus. David. Your brother David pushed me down those stairs 3 weeks ago when I told him I wasn't going to give him money for drugs anymore. The color drained from Simone's face. You're lying. I wish I was, baby. I wish I was. David had been my miracle baby, born 6 years after Simone, after the doctors told me I couldn't have any more children. He'd come into the world sunny and sweet, with dimples that made strangers stop us on the street just to pinch his cheeks. But miracles don't always stay miraculous. Somewhere between his sophomore year of high school and his 20th birthday, my son had found heroin. Or maybe heroin had found him. It didn't matter anymore. The result was the same. A beautiful boy with dead eyes who would steal from his own mother to feed the beast living inside him. Why didn't you tell me? Simone's voice was barely a whisper now. Because you would have done exactly what I didn't want you to do. You would have told Marcus, and Marcus would have handled it. And I love my son, baby. Even like this, even broken and addicted and violent, I love him. Simone stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. She walked to the window that overlooked her perfectly manicured backyard, where her children, my grandbabies, 6-year-old Amara and 4-year-old Marcus Jr., played on an expensive swing set. He almost killed you, Mama. You could have broken your neck. I know. And you're protecting him? I struggled to my feet, my broken arm throbbing. No, baby, I'm protecting you. Because the day you start thinking violence is an acceptable response to being hurt, the day you start praising your husband for teaching someone a lesson, that's the day you become what you hate. That's the day you become your grandmother. Simone spun around, tears streaming down her face. Don't you dare bring Grandma into this. Why not? Your grandmother spent 40 years married to a man who beat her every time he had a bad day. And you know what she did? She defended him. She made excuses. She told everyone who asked that she'd walked into a door, fallen down the stairs, tripped over the dog. Sound familiar? That's different. Marcus doesn't hit me. Not yet. The words fell between us like an axe. Simone collapsed back into her chair, her perfect composure finally cracking. You don't understand, Mama. That woman, she was going to destroy everything. She was going to tell lies about Marcus, try to break up our family. He was just... What did he do, Simone? Exactly what did Marcus do to this woman? My daughter's hands twisted in her lap. He confronted her. In the parking lot of her apartment building. He told her to stay away from him, to stop calling, to leave our family alone. And she got mouthy, started yelling, causing a scene. So he grabbed her, just to get her to calm down and listen. Where did he grab her? Mama, where, Simone? Her throat, my daughter whispered. He grabbed her throat and pushed her against her car. But he didn't hurt her. He just scared her a little, made her understand that he was serious. I felt bile rise in my throat. Baby, that's assault. That's a crime. She's not going to press charges. Marcus made sure of that. How? Simone looked away. He has friends in the police department. He explained the situation, showed them the text messages where she was harassing him. They talked to her, convinced her it would be in her best interest to leave it alone. I lowered myself back into my chair, suddenly feeling every one of my 58 years. This was worse than I'd imagined. This wasn't just a man with a temper. This was a man with power, with connections, with the ability to make problems disappear. "Tell me about the affair," I said quietly. Simone's head snapped up. "What?" "The affair Marcus had with this woman. Tell me about it." "There was no affair. She was just some—" "Simone Marie, I may be old, but I'm not stupid. Men don't grab women by the throat over phone calls unless there's more to the story. How long was he seeing her?" For a long moment, my daughter said nothing. Then, in a voice so small, it broke my heart, 6 months. It lasted 6 months. He ended it 3 months ago. The grandfather clock in Simone's living room ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Outside, I could hear my grandbabies laughing as they played, innocent and unaware that their mother's world was crumbling inside these walls. "He promised it wouldn't happen again," Simone said finally. "He went to counseling. He read books about being a better husband. He took me on a second honeymoon to Turks and Caicos. He was trying, Mama. He was really trying. Until she wouldn't let go. Until she wouldn't let go," Simone echoed. "She kept calling, kept texting. She showed up at his office, told his secretary they had a meeting. She threatened to tell me everything, to post about it on social media, to ruin his reputation. So he put his hands on her to shut her up. He was protecting our family." I slammed my good hand down on the table, the sound echoing through the room. "No, baby. He was protecting himself. There's a difference." Simone flinched, and I saw it then. The fear that lived behind her eyes, the fear she'd been hiding with designer clothes and expensive vacations and Facebook posts about her perfect life. She was afraid, not of Marcus putting his hands on her, but of something worse, losing everything she'd built, admitting she'd made a mistake, facing the judgment of everyone who'd envied her marriage. "Mama," she whispered, "what do I do?" Before I could answer, the front door opened. Heavy footsteps crossed the foyer, and then Marcus appeared in the doorway of the dining room, still dressed in his work suit, his tie loosened around his neck. "Mother Henderson," he said, with that perfect smile, that voice like warm honey. "I didn't know you were visiting today. How's the arm healing?" I looked at this man, this handsome, charming, dangerous man, and I saw my daughter's future. I saw years of walking on eggshells, of making excuses, of teaching her children that power and control were the same as love. "Marcus," I said evenly, "we need to talk about what you did to that woman, about what you are." The smile didn't falter, but something shifted in his eyes, something cold and calculating. "I don't know what Simone's been telling you, but the truth. She's been telling me the truth." Marcus's gaze slid to Simone, who sat frozen in her chair. "Baby, I think your mother's medication might be making her confused. Why don't we—" "Don't," I said, standing despite the pain shooting through my arm. "Don't you dare gaslight my daughter right in front of me. I know what you did. She knows what you did. And we both know it's going to happen again, unless she stops you now." "Mama, please," Simone started, but Marcus cut her off, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "You need to be very careful about accusations, Mother Henderson. Slander is a serious thing, and you of all people should understand that sometimes situations require a firm hand. After all, you let your own son put you in the hospital." The room went still. "How did you know about David?" I asked quietly. Marcus smiled, and this time there was nothing warm about it. You think I didn't do my research when I married into this family? I know all about your crackhead son. I know he's stolen from you, threatened you, put you in the hospital twice now. Yes, twice. That wasn't the first time he pushed you downstairs. I know you've enabled him for years, giving him money, making excuses, letting him destroy himself, while you stand by, watching. Each word was a knife, precise and cruel. He turned to Simone. Your mother wants to lecture me about violence, about protecting my family. She couldn't even protect herself from her own child. I saw Simone waver, saw the doubt creeping into her eyes. This was what Marcus did. He found your weakness and twisted it, made you question your own reality. You're right, I said. And both Marcus and Simone looked at me in surprise. I failed with David. I loved him so much that I enabled his destruction. I was so afraid of losing him that I lost myself instead. And I'm not going to let my daughter make the same mistake with you. I walked closer to Marcus, ignoring the pain in my arm, ignoring the way he straightened to his full height, trying to intimidate me with his size. I'd faced down bigger demons than him. You think you're protecting your family? You're a predator. You cheated on my daughter for 6 months, and when your mistress wouldn't go quietly, you assaulted her. You used your connections to cover it up, to silence her. And now you're standing here in your own house, threatening me, trying to manipulate Simone into thinking this is normal. Get out of my house, Marcus said, his voice cold as ice. No, the word came from Simone, who had finally stood up. Tears streaked her face, but her voice was steady. No, Marcus, you get out. Marcus laughed, but there was an edge to it now. Baby, come on. You're going to believe your mother over me. After everything I've given you, after everything we've built together. Everything you've built, Simone corrected, on lies and affairs and violence. Mama, tell me honestly, if I stay with him, if I let this go, what happens next? I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and I told her the truth. One day, maybe a year from now, maybe 5, you'll do something that makes him angry. You'll question him about working late, or you'll check his phone, or you'll dare to disagree with him in front of his friends, and he'll grab you by the throat just like he grabbed that woman. He'll tell you he's sorry, that you pushed him to it, that he just lost control for a second. And you'll believe him, because you'll remember this moment, and you'll think, I should have been more understanding, more supportive. You'll teach our grandbabies that violence is love, that silence is loyalty, that their pain doesn't matter as much as keeping the peace. This is ridiculous, Marcus snapped. Simone, tell your mother. No, Simone said again, and this time her voice was stronger. No, Marcus, I want you to leave. Tonight. Go to a hotel. Go to your mother's house. I don't care, but you need to leave while I figure out what to do. Something flickered across Marcus's face. Fury, disbelief, and underneath it all, genuine surprise. He wasn't used to being told no. Not by Simone, not by anyone. If I leave, he said slowly, I'm taking the kids. No, you're not, I said firmly, because if you try, I'm calling the police and telling them everything. The affair, the assault, the cover-up. And I don't care how many friends you have on the force. Domestic violence is a felony in Maryland, and attempted kidnapping won't help your case. You wouldn't dare. I pulled out my phone with my good hand. Try me. For a long moment, Marcus stood there, his jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists at his sides. I could see him calculating, weighing his options, trying to find an angle to regain control. Then he turned and walked out. We heard him storm up the stairs, heard drawers slamming, heard him moving through the house with barely controlled rage. 15 minutes later, he came back down with a suitcase, walked past us without a word, and left through the front door. The sound of his Mercedes starting up and pulling away was the sweetest thing I'd heard in years. Simone collapsed into my arms, sobbing. What have I done? What am I going to do? I held my daughter with my one good arm, stroking her hair the way I did when she was little and had nightmares. You're going to survive, baby. You're going to be okay. The next 3 months were the hardest of Simone's life, and some of the hardest of mine. Marcus hired the most expensive divorce lawyer in the state. He froze their joint accounts. He told everyone who would listen that Simone was having a mental breakdown, that I'd poisoned her against him, that he was the victim of a vindictive ex-wife and her manipulative mother. The woman he'd assaulted, her name was Keisha, we learned, came forward. She gave a statement to a detective who actually cared, one who wasn't on Marcus's payroll. The case was building, slowly but surely. But the court of public opinion was vicious. Simone's friends divided into camps. Her Instagram went from pictures of perfect family moments to a feed she barely touched. She lost clients at her interior design business. People whispered in church. Through it all, I was there. I moved into her guest room, helped with the kids, fielded the nasty phone calls and the nastier text messages. I watched my daughter learn to be strong in ways she'd never had to be before. And I dealt with David. My son showed up at Simone's house 2 weeks after Marcus left, desperate for money, high as a kite. When I refused, when Simone backed me up, he threatened to tell Marcus where we were keeping important documents for the divorce case. You'd sell out your own sister? I asked him, my heart breaking. I'd do whatever I have to do, Ma. You don't understand what it's like. Then let me help you. Real help. Rehab. A treatment program. Therapy. David laughed. That hollow sound I'd come to hate. How you gonna pay for that? You're broke. Simone's about to be broke. Face it, Ma. We're all going down. But he was wrong. I'd been making phone calls, doing research, fighting through bureaucracy. I found a program that would take David, a state-funded facility that had an opening. It wasn't fancy, but it was real. It was hope. You have to want it, I told him. I can open the door, but you have to walk through it. David stood on Simone's porch, shaking, sweating, crying. My beautiful son, reduced to this. I'm scared, Mama. I know, baby. But I'm more scared of what happens if you don't try. He went. 3 days later, David checked himself into treatment. It wasn't a miracle. There were setbacks, relapses, moments when I thought we'd lost him for good. But slowly, painfully, my son started to come back to me. Marcus's assault trial happened 6 months after he left. Simone sat in the courtroom every day, dressed simply, no makeup, her natural hair in a protective style instead of the expensive weaves Marcus had preferred. She held my good hand. The cast was off now, the bone healed, but the memory still fresh. Keisha testified. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 25, with kind eyes and a voice that shook when she described what Marcus had done, how he'd pursued her, made her feel special, promised her things he never intended to deliver. How, when she'd gotten pregnant and then miscarried his baby, he'd disappeared, blocked her number, denied everything. How, when she'd shown up at his office, desperate and grieving and angry, he'd followed her home and tried to choke the life out of her in a parking lot. I thought I was going to die, she whispered. I could see it in his eyes. He wanted me dead. He wanted me erased. Marcus's lawyer tried to discredit her, tried to paint her as a scorned woman, a liar, an opportunist, but there were texts, emails, medical records from her miscarriage, a statement from a neighbor who'd seen the assault and called 911. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty. Marcus got 18 months. Not enough, never enough, but something. He also got a restraining order, lost custody of his kids, and had his reputation destroyed. His firm let him go. His friends melted away. The man who thought he was untouchable learned what it felt like to fall. Simone cried on the courthouse steps, but they weren't tears of victory. They were tears of grief, for the marriage that never really existed, for the man she'd thought she'd known, for the years she couldn't get back. How did I miss it? She asked me. How did I not see what he was? Because he didn't want you to see it, baby. And because sometimes we love people so much we make them better in our minds than they are in reality. It's not a weakness, it's just human. A year after the trial, Simone's life looked completely different. She'd sold the house in Upper Marlboro. Too many bad memories, too much Marcus's taste, and not enough hers. She bought a smaller place in a diverse neighborhood with good schools and a real community. The kind of place where neighbors looked out for each other, where kids played in the streets, where the old ladies sat on porches and watched the world go by. Her business was growing again. Clients who'd abandoned her during the scandal came back, sheepish and apologetic. New clients came through word of mouth, women who'd heard her story and wanted to support her. Amara and Marcus Jr., who now went by MJ because he didn't want to share a name with his father anymore, were thriving. They saw a therapist who specialized in children of divorce. They asked hard questions and got honest answers. They learned that their father's choices weren't their fault, that love shouldn't hurt, that family meant safety. David completed his program and moved into a sober living facility. He got a job at a community center, teaching basketball to kids who reminded him of himself. Talented, troubled, teetering on the edge. He called me every week, came to Sunday dinner once a month, and showed up for his niece and nephew's birthdays with thoughtful gifts and clear eyes. He'd been sober for 8 months. Each day was a battle, but each day he chose to fight. As for me, I finally moved out of that apartment building where I'd fallen down the stairs. I moved in with Simone, took over the guest room, helped with the kids, cooked Sunday dinners that filled the house with laughter and the smell of my grandmother's cornbread recipe. My arm healed completely, though sometimes it ached when it rained. The physical scars faded, but the emotional ones taught me something important. I'd spent so much of my life trying to hold my family together that I'd allowed them to break me apart. I'd enabled David's addiction, ignored Simone's warning signs with Marcus, sacrificed my own well-being for the illusion of peace. No more. One Sunday afternoon, about 18 months after that terrible day when Simone had said those words, my husband taught her a lesson. We sat on her new porch, drinking sweet tea and watching the kids play in the front yard. Mama, Simone said quietly, I need to tell you something. My heart clenched. What is it, baby? Keisha called me last week. I set down my glass. What did she want? To apologize. Can you believe that? She apologized to me for sleeping with my husband, for not being stronger, for letting him manipulate her. And you know what I realized? What? That she and I aren't that different. We both loved a man who didn't deserve it. We both ignored warning signs because we wanted the fantasy more than we wanted the truth. We both taught ourselves that love meant sacrifice, even when what we were sacrificing was our own dignity and safety. Simone turned to me, and in her eyes, I saw something I'd been praying for. Wisdom. The kind that only comes through pain. I almost became grandma. she whispered. I almost spent my life defending a man who would have destroyed me. If you hadn't told me about David, if you hadn't shown me what enabling looked like, if you hadn't been brave enough to speak the truth, even when it hurt. Mama, you saved my life. I took her hand. You saved your own life, baby. I just opened the door. You walked through it. We all did. You stopped enabling David. I stopped defending Marcus. David stopped running from his demons. We all chose to save ourselves instead of sacrificing ourselves for people who didn't deserve it. I thought about that, about the generational curse we'd broken, about the lessons we'd learned, about the price we'd paid for wisdom. Your grandmother used to say that strong Black women carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. I said, but you know what? We don't have to. Strength isn't about how much pain you can endure. It's about knowing when to put the weight down. Simone smiled through her tears. I'm teaching that to Amara and to MJ. I'm teaching them that love doesn't hurt, that respect isn't optional, that their voices matter. I'm teaching them to recognize red flags, to trust their instincts, to run from danger instead of making excuses for it. That's the real lesson, I said. Not that my husband taught her a lesson, but that we taught ourselves. We learned that protecting our families means protecting ourselves first. We learned that sometimes love means walking away. We learned that breaking cycles is painful but necessary. David pulled up then in his beat-up Honda, clean and sober and smiling. He got out and the kids ran to him, jumping into his arms while he spun them around. He'd lost so much to his addiction, but he was getting something back, himself. Family dinner, he called out to us. Family dinner, Simone confirmed. Your turn to say grace. We gathered around the table an hour later. 4 generations of Black women and men who'd survived everything life had thrown at them. As we held hands and bowed our heads, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. David's voice was steady as he prayed. Lord, thank you for second chances. Thank you for people who love us enough to tell us the truth, even when it hurts. Thank you for broken bones that heal stronger than before. And thank you for teaching us that the only lessons worth teaching are the ones we learn ourselves. That love is patient, love is kind, and love never ever comes with a closed fist. Amen. Amen, we echoed. And as we passed plates of fried chicken and mac and cheese and collard greens, as we laughed and teased and told stories, I realized something. We weren't perfect. We were scarred and broken and still healing, but we were free. And that was the lesson worth learning. I'm writing this from Simone's living room while my grandbabies do their homework at the kitchen table. David's leading a support group at the community center. Simone's business is thriving. She just landed a contract to design the interior for a new women's shelter, a job she took at cost because she knows what it means to need a safe place to land. Marcus got out of jail last year. We hear he moved to Atlanta, tried to start over. I hope he got the help he needs, though part of me will always hate him for what he did to my daughter, to Keisha, to the woman he could have become if he'd chosen healing over control. But this story isn't about him. It's about us, about the Black women and men who survive, who endure, who break generational curses and build new legacies. It's about the lessons we teach and the ones we refuse to pass down. My arm doesn't hurt anymore, except on the coldest days, but I keep the x-rays in a folder in my closet, a reminder of the day everything changed, the day I stopped protecting the wrong people and started protecting the right ones, the day we all learned that the only lesson worth teaching is this: your safety matters, your dignity matters, your voice matters. And anyone who tells you different is teaching you the wrong lesson. What's your story? Have you ever had to make the hard choice to protect yourself or someone you love from a toxic relationship? Have you broken a generational cycle in your family? Share your experience in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if this resonated with you, subscribe for more real stories about real families finding their way through the darkness and into the light. Remember, strength isn't silence. Strength is speaking your truth, even when your voice shakes.